56, now covered by the Governor-General's Act, RSC 1985, C. G9. 57. Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan were placed in the same position as the original provinces by the Constitution Act, 1930, 20-21 George V, C26, UK. These matters were dealt with in respect of British Columbia by the British Columbia Terms of Union, and also in part by the Constitution Act, 1930. Newfoundland was also placed in the same position by the Newfoundland Act, 12-13 George V 1, C22, UK. With respect to Prince Edward Island, see the schedule to the Prince Edward Island Terms of Union. 58. The obligations imposed by Sections 114, 115, and 116, and similar obligations under the instruments creating or admitting other provinces, are now to be found in the Provincial Subsidies Act, RSC 1985, C. P 26. 59. Repealed by the Statute Law Revision Act, 1950, 14 George VI, C6, UK. The section originally read as follows: 118. The following sum shall be paid yearly by Canada to the several provinces for the support of their governments and legislatures: Ontario, $80,000; Quebec, $70,000; Nova Scotia, $60,000; New Brunswick, $50,000. Total, $260,000, and an annual grant in aid of each province shall be made, equal to 80 cents per head of the population, as ascertained by the census of 1861, and in the case of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, by each subsequent decennial census, until the population of each of those two provinces amounts to 400,000 souls, at which rate such grant shall thereafter remain. Such grants shall be in full settlement of all future demands on Canada, and shall be paid half-yearly in advance to each province, but the Government of Canada shall deduct from such grants, as against any province, all sums chargeable as interest on the public debt of that province in excess of the several amounts stipulated in this Act. The section was made obsolete by the Constitution Act, 1907, 7 Edward VII, C11, UK, which provided 1. The following grants shall be made yearly by Canada to every province which at the commencement of this Act is a province of the Dominion, for its local purposes, and the support of its government and legislature. A fixed grant, where the population of the province is under 150,000, of $100,000. Where the population of the province is 150,000, but does not exceed 200,000, of $150,000. Where the population of the province is 200,000, but does not exceed 400,000, of $180,000. Where the population of the province is 400,000, but does not exceed 800,000, of $190,000. Where the population of the province is 800,000, but does not exceed 1,500,000, of $220,000. Where the population of the province exceeds 1,500,000, of $240,000, and b. subject to the special provisions of this Act as to the provinces of British Columbia and Prince Edward Island, a grant at the rate of 80 cents per head of the population of the province up to the number of 2,500,000, and at the rate of 60 cents per head of so much of the population as exceeds that number. 2. An additional grant of $100,000 shall be made yearly to the province of British Columbia for a period of 10 years from the commencement of this Act. 3. The population of a province shall be ascertained from time to time in the case of the provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta respectively by the last quinquennial census or statutory estimate of population made under the Acts establishing those provinces, or any other act of the Parliament of Canada making provision for the purpose, and in the case of any other province by the last decennial census, for the time being. 4. The grants payable under this Act shall be paid half-yearly in advance to each province. 5. The grants payable under this Act shall be substituted for the grants or subsidies in this Act referred to as existing grants, payable for the like purposes at the commencement of this Act to the several provinces of the Dominion, under the provisions of Section 118 of the Constitution Act, 1867, or of any order in council establishing a province, or of any act of the Parliament of Canada containing directions for the payment of any such grant or subsidy. And those provisions shall cease to have effect. 6. The Government of Canada shall have the same power of deducting sums charged against a province on account of the interest on public debt in the case of the grant payable under this Act to the province as they have in the case of the existing grant. 7. Nothing in this Act shall affect the obligation of the Government of Canada to pay to any province any grant which is payable to that province other than the existing grant for which the grant under this Act is substituted. 8. In the case of the provinces of British Columbia and Prince Edward Island, the amount paid on account of the grant payable per head of the population to the provinces under this Act shall not at any time be less than the amount of the corresponding grant payable at the commencement of this Act, and if it is found on any decennial census that the population of the province has decreased since the last decennial census, the amount paid on account of the grant shall not be decreased below the amount then payable, notwithstanding the decrease of the population. See the Provincial Subsidies Act, RSC 1985, c. p. 26, and the Federal Provincial Fiscal Arrangements Act, RSC 1985, c. f. 8. See also Part 3 of the Constitution Act, 1982, which sets out commitments by Parliament and the provincial legislatures respecting equal opportunities, economic development, and the provision of essential public services, and a commitment by Parliament and the Government of Canada to the principle of making equalization payments. 60. Spent. 61. Spent. Now covered by the Customs Act, RSC 1985, C1, Second Sup. The Customs Tariff, SC 1997, C36, the Excise Act, RSC 1985, C. E14, the Excise Act, 2001, SC 2002, C22, and the Excise Tax Act, RSC 1985, C. E15, 62, spent, 63. These dues were repealed in 1873 by 36 Victoria, C16, and B. Also, see an act respecting the export duties imposed on lumber, etc., 1873, 36 Victoria, C41, Canada, and Section 2 of the Provincial Subsidies Act, RSC 1985, c. p. 26, 64, repealed by the Statute Law Revision Act, 1893, 56-57 Victoria, C14, UK. The section read as follows. 127. If any person being at the passing of this Act a member of the Legislative Council of Canada, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick, to whom a place in the Senate is offered, does not within 30 days thereafter, by writing, under his hand addressed to the Governor-General of the Province of Canada, or to the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, as the case may be, accept the same, he shall be deemed to have declined the same, and any person, who, being at the passing of this Act a member of the Legislative Council of Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, accepts a place in the Senate shall thereby vacate his seat in such Legislative Council. 65. The restriction against altering or repealing laws enacted by or existing under statutes of the United Kingdom was removed by the Statute of Westminster, 1931, 22 George V, C4, UK, except in respect of certain constitutional documents. Comprehensive procedures for amending enactments forming part of the Constitution of Canada were provided by Part 5 of the Constitution Act, 1982, 66. Spent. 67. A similar provision was enacted for Manitoba by Section 23 of the Manitoba Act, 1870, 33 Victoria, C3, confirmed by the Constitution Act, 1871, 34-35 Victoria, C28, UK, Section 23 ed. As follows. 23. Either the English or the French language may be used by any person in the debates of the Houses of the Legislature, and both these languages shall be used in the respective records and journals of those Houses, and either of those languages may be used by any person or in any pleading or process in, or issuing from any court of Canada established under the British North America Act, 1867, or in, or from all or any of the courts of the province. The acts of the legislature shall be printed and published in both those languages. Section 17 to 19 of the Constitution Act, 1980 to restate the language rights set out in Section 133, in respect of Parliament, and the courts established under the Constitution Act, 1867, and also guarantee those rights in respect of the legislature of New Brunswick, and the courts of that province. Section 16, 20, 21, and 23 of the Constitution Act, 1980 to recognize additional language rights in respect of the English and French languages. Section 22 preserves language rights and privileges of languages other than English and French. 68. Spent. Now covered in Ontario by the Executive Council Act, RSO 1990, CE.25, and in Quebec by the Executive Power Act, RSQC, E18.